listen, they should be able to say whatever they want.
Father Jonathan, here we have Jonathan Marcer. Here's President Trump.
Because that should have happened a long time ago. I think they're being very tardy and not doing it and not having done it sooner. They raised too quickly, and I've been quite vocal on that. They also did quantitative tightening, which was ridiculous. And so, and despite that, if you look, I guess you could call it normalized, but if you look, our economy is doing fantastically. And if you take a look at the previous administration, they weren't paying interest. They had no interest rates. They had loosening, not tightening. And frankly, it's a big difference. And our economy is incredible. Our jobs, you look at the jobs market, but you have to be proactive. And so we really need a Fed cut rate, because if you look at what's going on with the European Union, as an example, they're cutting. You take a look at Germany, what they're doing and what they're paying. I mean, they're actually doing something inverse they've never seen. Nobody's ever seen it before. We have to at least keep up to an extent. So right now, we're paying a very much higher rate of interest, and we didn't follow the world. And generally speaking, that's okay, but you can't have that much of a disparity. So we're looking for a rate cut. We could be really greatly helped if the Fed would do its job and do a substantial rate cut. Also, they were doing quantitative tightening, very bad to do. They should do easing, actual easing, no tightening, or at a minimum, they should be doing nothing about that. But they have to do a rate cut. The other thing is, we're looking at various tax reductions. But I'm looking at that all the time anyway, tax reductions. That's one of the reasons we're in such a strong economic position. We're right now the #1 country anywhere in the world by far as an economy. Europe's got a lot of problems, and Asia's got a lot of problems. You look at China. China's had the worst year they've had in 27 years, and they want to make a deal with us. But I can tell you I'm not ready to make a deal unless they're going to make the right kind of a deal. I'm not ready to make a deal. So I don't know. But I will say this, something will happen, maybe soon and maybe a little bit later, but China very much wants to make a deal.
What kind of tax cuts would you look at? We've heard again, potential cut in the payroll tax, indexing capital gains. What would you accept?
Well, we've been talking about indexing for a long time, and many people like indexing, and it can be done very simply. It can be done directly by me. And so we've been looking at that. As you probably have heard, I can do it directly. So we're talking about indexing, and we're always looking at the capital gains tax, payroll tax. We're looking at, I would love to do something on capital gains. We're talking about that. That's a big deal, goes through Congress. Payroll tax is something that we think about, and a lot of people would like to see that, and that very much affects the workers of our country, and we have a lot of workers. Right now, by the way, we have more people working today than we've ever had before in the history of our country. We have almost 160 million people working today. I think the word recession is a word that's inappropriate, because it's just a word that the certain people, I'm going to be kind, certain people in the media are trying to build up, because they'd love to see a recession. We're very far from a recession. In fact, if the Fed would do its job, I think we have a tremendous spurt of growth, a tremendous spurt. The Fed is psychologically very important, less so actually, but very psychologically important. And if the Fed would do its job, which it's really done very poorly over the last year and a half, you would see a burst of growth like you've never seen before. And that would be lowering interest rates and maybe putting some if you look at what China is doing, if you look at what Germany is doing, if you look at what so many countries are doing, putting some money in, because we want to compete with these other countries. So I think that we actually are set for a tremendous surge of growth if the Fed would do its job. That's a big if, frankly. But the Fed should be cutting, and I would say they should say at a minimum 100 basis points over a period of time, not at one time, but over a period of time.
Mr. President,
those are your economy really need a statement.
Mr. President, can the country afford tax cuts when we're already running?
Well, I'm not talking about doing anything at this moment, but indexing is something that a lot of people have liked for a long time, and it's something that would be very easy to do. And a lot of people have been talking about indexing for many years. And it's something that I am certainly thinking about. I can say that a majority of the people in the White House at the level that does this kind of thing, they like indexing. So it is something I'm thinking about. Payroll taxes, I've been thinking about payroll taxes for a long time. Whether or not we do it now or not is, it's not being done because of recession, because we are legitimately, if we had a cut in interest rates by the Fed, if they would do their job properly, and if they would do a meaningful cut because they raised too fast, you would see growth like you've not seen ever in this country. Now, if you go from the election, that great November 8th date, if you go from November 9th to present, you're talking about almost a 60% increase in the stock market. You're talking about unemployment numbers that are the lowest in history in many categories, and overall almost the lowest ever in the history of our country. I think it was 1969, and we are set to surpass that number. I mean, our country is doing very well. When I spoke to the president, we were just walking in, and he said, "Congratulations on the great success of your economy and your country," and I appreciated that, but our country is doing very well.
Mr. President, would you agree strengthening American military forces in Romania?
Well, it's one of the things we'll be talking about today. I assume you might be bringing that up, but it's something we'll talk about.
Mr. President,
Next year you host the G7. Would you like to have Vladimir Putin back in the G7, make it the G8 again?
So it was the G8 for a long time, and now it's the G7. And a lot of the time we talk about Russia. We're talking about Russia because I've gone to numerous G7 meetings. And I guess President Obama, because Putin outsmarted him, President Obama thought it wasn't a good thing to have Russia in, so he wanted Russia out. But I think it's much more appropriate to have Russia in. It should be the G8 because a lot of the things we talk about have to do with Russia. So I could certainly see it being the G8 again, and if somebody would make that motion, I would certainly be disposed to think about it very favorably. But as you know, for most of the time, it was the G8. It included Russia, and President Obama didn't want Russia in because he got outsmarted. Well, that's not the way it really should work.
Mr. President, 2 years ago you said that including Romania in a visa waiver program is a subject that should be discussed.
Yeah.
In this meeting, will you discuss
We've
this?
spent a lot of time on it. We've spent a lot of time discussing it already. Our countries have been discussing it, and we're taking it up today at a very important meeting right after this.
Can you talk us about
Do you like the idea? It sounds like you like the idea, right? The waiver, do you like the idea? Okay. No, it's something we're thinking about.
Mr. President, on Venezuela, is the White House in contact with the Maduro regime, with
Yes.
its number 2, Cabello?
Well, we are in touch. We're talking to various representatives of Venezuela. We're helping Venezuela as much as we can. We're staying out of it, but we are helping it, and it needs a lot of help. It's an incredible tribute to something bad happening, and the something bad is socialism. And it's amazing because 15 years ago it was one of the wealthiest countries. Now it's one of the poorest countries. It has oil reserves, has a lot of things going, but it's a very sad thing what's happened. They don't have water, they don't have food, and we are helping a lot. We are talking to the representatives at different levels of Venezuela, yes. I don't want to say who, but we are talking at a very high level.
What's the status of the trade deal that you want to seal with Boris Johnson at the G7?
So I spoke with Boris Johnson. I think he's going to be a great prime minister. I think he's going to do a fantastic job. I've known him. A lot of people know that we have a very good relationship. I think he'll be far superior. I think he'll do something that will be I think he's going to be very important for the UK. I think he's going to be very important. Dealing with the European Union, I hate to say this to you, but dealing with the European Union is very difficult. They drive a hard bargain. They're represented by Jean-Claude, who is a friend of mine, but he's a tough man. He's a very, very tough man. He's a great negotiator. And we have all the cards in this country because all we'd have to do is tax their cars and they would give us anything they wanted because they send millions of Mercedes over. They send millions of BMWs over. But we're talking to the European Union. We're going to see if we can work something out. But I will say this, dealing with the UK, they have not treated the UK very well. That's a very tough bargain they're driving, the European Union. It's a very tough bargain. And I think that UK has the right man in charge right now, the right person in charge in the form of Boris.
And if I could turn to Afghanistan, what is your current thinking on pulling out the United States?
Well, we're
troops?
talking to the government of Afghanistan. We're talking to the Taliban, and we're talking to others. And we're looking at different things. We've been there for 18 years. It's ridiculous. We have taken it down a notch. We're at about 13,000 people right now, 13,000 Americans. NATO has some troops there too, by the way. And we're having good discussions. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Look, it's 18 years. We're not really fighting. We're almost more of a police force over there. It's been so many years, but we're like a police force, and we're not supposed to be a police force. And as I've said, and I'll say it any number of times, and this is not using nuclear, we could win that war in a week if we wanted to fight it. But I'm not looking to kill 10 million people. I'm not looking to kill 10 million Afghans, because that's what would have to happen. And I'm not looking to do that. But it's a war that has been going on for almost 19 years now. And frankly, it's ridiculous. But with that being said, it's a dangerous place, and we have to always keep an eye on it.
Sounds like you'd like to pull completely out if you could.
I'd like to look at various alternatives. One of the alternatives is going on right now. We're talking about a plan. I don't know whether or not the plan's going to be acceptable to me, and maybe it's not going to be acceptable to them. But we are talking. We have good talks going, and we'll see what happens. This is more than other presidents have done. But we have brought it down. We are bringing some of our troops back. But we have to have a presence, yes.
Mr. President, could you clarify your position on enhanced background checks? After El Paso and Dayton, you seem to be fully in support of enhanced measures. When you were leaving Bedminster, you seemed to suggest that we already do have strong background laws, which a lot of people read as you dialing back
Well, we
on what
do
you
have.
said.
I mean, I'm not doing that to be cute. We have very, very strong background checks right now. But we have sort of missing areas and areas that don't complete the whole circle. And we're looking at different things, and I have to tell you that it is a mental problem, and I've said it 100 times. It's not the gun that pulls the trigger, it's the person that pulls the trigger. These are sick people, and it is also that kind of a problem. And we're looking at mental institutions, which we used to have. Like, as an example, where I come from in New York, they closed up almost all of their mental institutions, or many of them, and those people just went onto the streets, and they did it for budgetary reasons. Well, New York is not unique. They've done that in many places.
Would you support either of the House bills that were passed
Well,
earlier this year?
I'm not going to get into that, but we are in very meaningful discussions with the Democrats, and I think the Republicans are very unified. We are very strong on our Second Amendment. The Democrats are not strong at all in the Second Amendment. I would say they're weak on the Second Amendment. And we have to be careful of that. The Democrats would, I think they'd give up the Second Amendment. And the people that, a lot of the people that put me where I am are strong believers in the Second Amendment. And I am also. And we have to be very careful about that. You know, they call it the slippery slope. And all of a sudden, everything gets taken away. We're not going to let that happen.
For President Yohannes, will you discuss,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
For President Yohannes, will you discuss the issue of the fight against corruption in Romania with President Trump? Will you discuss this issue?
Go ahead.
Well, I hope so, because we have good results, and I want to share those with President Trump.
What is your question?
I was asking about the fight against
So nice to have a question about Romania.
Yeah. So I asked you, will you discuss this issue, the fight against corruption, with the Romanian?
Sure, I will.
Last time you praised.
Sure, I will. Of course I will.
Last time you praised.
But I think that this is a man that can solve the corruption problem in Romania. And he's made big strides. From what I hear, I haven't been there recently, but he's made very big strides. And I think he's the man that can solve the corruption problem. There are a number of really terrific countries like Romania, but they have a tremendous corruption problem, and I've heard you've made tremendous progress.
We did.
Yeah.
Mr. President, what's the status of your foreign aid cut package? Do you still support cutting $4
Well,
billion?
we're looking at it, and we're looking at it in different ways, and we're talking to Republicans and Democrats about it, and certain things we can save, and certain things it probably could be, you know, a penny wise. Maybe it's a penny wise. We'll see. But we are looking at it, and we have some things that are on the table very much, and we'll let you know over the next, probably sooner than a week.
Mr. President, your administration has been taking steps to make it easier to discriminate against LGBT people in the workforce. Are you okay with those actions?
Well, you know, I just got an award and an endorsement yesterday from the exact group, in a group. They gave, you saw that, they gave me the endorsement yesterday, and I was very honored to, is it Log Cabin, the Log Cabin Group, and I was very honored to receive it. No, I've done very well with that community. Some of my biggest supporters are of that community, and I think and I talk to them a lot about it. I think I've done really very well with that community. As you know, Peter Thiel and so many others, they're with me all the way, and they like the job I'm doing. And I just got a big endorsement from the Log Cabin Group. Yeah.
Mr. President, you keep insisting that your trade war with China, the trade war with China, is not affecting the U.S. economy, but a lot of economists disagree with that, and they're worried that if China goes into recession...
Well, okay, let me tell you something. Number one, we're doing very well as an economy. But somebody had to take China on. You know, I read and I see so much, and I read so much, and I'll see these economists saying, oh, give up on China, give up. China's been ripping this country off for 25 years, for longer than that. And it's about time, whether it's good for our country or bad for our country short term, long term, it's imperative that somebody does this. Because our country cannot continue to pay China $500 billion a year because stupid people are running it. So I don't mind this question. Whether it's good or bad short term is irrelevant. We have to solve the problem with China because they're taking out $500 billion a year plus, and that doesn't include intellectual property theft and other things, and also national security. So I am doing this, whether it's good or bad, for your statement about, oh, will we fall into a recession for 2 months, okay? The fact is, somebody had to take China on. My life would be a lot easier if I didn't take China on, but I like doing it because I have to do it, and we're getting great results. China's had the worst year they've had in 27 years, and a lot of people are saying the worst year they've had in 54 years, okay? And frankly, I don't want that to happen, but it does put us in a good negotiating position, doesn't it? And China wants to make a deal, and that's good, but they have to make a deal that's fair to us. It can't be a deal that's not fair to us. And you should be happy that I'm fighting this and I'm fighting this battle because somebody had to do it. We couldn't let this go. I don't even think it's sustainable to let go on what was happening. They were stealing all of our intellectual property ideas. The theft was incredible. They call it intellectual property theft. And they value it at $300 billion a year. Who knows how they value it? I know how to value dollars. I don't know how to value intellectual property theft. But they have experts that say it's at least $300 billion a year where they steal it. Somebody had to do something with China. Obama should have done it. Bush should have done it. Clinton should have done it. They all should have done it. Nobody did it. I'm doing it. So what do you say? Oh, my trade deals are causing a... My trade deals aren't causing a problem. This is something that had to be done. The only difference is I'm doing it. I could be sitting here right now with the stock market that would be up 10,000 points higher if I didn't want to do it. But I think we have no choice but to do it. And a lot of people that really know, people that love our country, they're saying, thank you very much for taking it on. And we're winning because they're having the worst year they've had in decades. And it's only going to get worse. China's lost 2 million jobs in the last month and a half because they're moving. The people, the companies are moving to non-tariff countries. They've lost over 2 million jobs in a very short period of time. They're going to lose a lot more jobs. And if I didn't help certain companies, or American companies like Apple, for a very short period of time, I may help them, only till they do what they have to do, which is probably move from China. Because this would be very short term. If I didn't help them, they would have a big problem. Here's the thing. Somebody had to take on what China was doing to the United States economically. We're winning big. I took it on, and it should have been done by previous presidents, but I took it on. And I'm happy to do it because it had to be done. And the smart people say, thank you very much. And the dumb people have no idea. And then you have the political people, and they go with the wind. But they all know. Even Senator Schumer said, wow, Trump's doing a great job with China. I couldn't believe that. But Schumer thinks I'm doing the right thing, and he's doing the right thing by saying it, because he knows that China was a big economic threat. And they were taking all of that money that they were making from us, and they were building planes and ships and lots of other things. And we can't let that happen.
Mr. President, on China, there is a new study out of Australia that suggests with the current Chinese military posture in the South China Sea, Indo-Pacific region, it could wipe out most U.S. bases within a number of hours. Is that something that keeps you up at night?
Well, nothing keeps me up at night. I'll tell you, we could wipe out anything we want. We have the most powerful in the world. And when I came in 2.5 years ago, we were in a very bad position. Now we're in a very strong position. We got $700 billion, then $716 billion, and then $738 billion. We have the strongest military in the world right now, and we're getting very close to finishing that whole rebuilding. We've rebuilt the military. Right now, there's nobody that's even close to us militarily, not even close.
So that doesn't concern you at all, the Chinese military?
No, because they'd pay a price that they wouldn't want to pay.
Is John Sullivan your choice for U.S. ambassador?
He's somebody that's being put up and respected very much. To Russia?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very respected.
So he's your pick, or yours?
Well, I know that Mike Pompeo likes him very much, and he's very respected. He could very well be. Yeah.
What about Huawei, Mr. President? Do you think partners like Romania here should look into the business of Huawei in order to make a true decision?
They're doing that. Romania is doing that.
Mr. President, on Afghanistan again, the Taliban are talking to the US, but they're not talking to the Afghan government. If the US were to draw down and the Taliban went on the offensive, would the US come and basically save the Afghan government?
Well, the Taliban does not respect the government, the Afghan government. They have no respect for the Afghan government, and I understand that, and I know that. And they haven't been exactly getting along for a long period of time. But we've been a peacekeeper there in a way for 19 years, and at a certain point you have to say, that's long enough. I go to Walter Reed and I see young men that step on a bomb and they lose their legs, they lose their arms, in some case they lose both and their face on top of it, and they're living. And again, we could win that, but I don't want to do what we would have to do to win it.
Would you,
and I think most people agree with me on that.
Protecting the Afghan government?
Right now, what we're doing is we're negotiating with the government and we're negotiating with the Taliban, and we'll see what happens from it, what's coming from it. I will say this, the Taliban would like to stop fighting us. They would like to stop fighting us. They've lost a lot, but we'll see what happens. And remember, it's a tough place. The Soviet Union became Russia because of Afghanistan. That's what happened. Very simple. They became Russia because of Afghanistan. Somebody would say, oh, well, would Russia go in? I said, if they want, let them. I think they tried that before. However, didn't work out too well.
Can the Taliban be trusted, or could we be right back to where
Nobody
we
can
were
be trusted.
pre-9/11?
Nobody can be trusted.
Are you worried that we could be back
My
to where we
world,
were
in this
pre-9/11?
world, I think nobody can be trusted.
But could we be back to where we were pre-9/11 with the Taliban in complete
Well,
control?
that's what we have to watch. And we'll always have intelligence, and we'll always have somebody there. But you can say that about a lot of places, John. You know, it doesn't have to be that sector. But that does seem to be the Harvard University of terrorism, okay? It seems to be. And we'll always have somebody there. And if the Taliban were really right in what they're saying, they would stop that from happening, because they could stop that from happening very easily.
How do you
Crisis
see
So we'll
between
see.
India and Pakistan, I know you've
a
had
big
some
deal.
number of discussions. Is that solvable?
Well, they've been having these talks for hundreds of years, even under different names. But it's Kashmir, and Kashmir is a very complicated place. You have the Hindus and you have the Muslims, and I wouldn't say they get along so great. And that's what you have right now. And you have millions of people that want to be ruled by others, and maybe on both sides, and you have two countries that haven't gotten along well for a long time. And frankly, it's a very explosive situation. I spoke to Prime Minister Khan. I spoke with yesterday also Prime Minister Modi. They're both friends of mine. They're great people. They're great people, and they love their countries. And they're in a very tough situation. Kashmir is a very tough situation. And, you know, we're talking about, this has been going on for decades, shooting. I don't mean shooting like shooting a rifle. I mean like major shooting of howitzers, of heavy arms. And it's been going on for a long period of time. But I get along really well with both of them. As you know, Prime Minister Khan was here just recently, and I'm going to be with Prime Minister Modi. I'll be with him over the weekend in France. So, I think we're helping the situation, but there's tremendous problems between those two countries, as you know, and I will do the best I can to mediate or do something. Great relationship with both of them, but they are not exactly friends at this moment. Complicated situation. A lot has to do with religion. Religion's a complicated subject.
On Israel, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar yesterday said that the United States should rethink its policy of aid toward Israel after she and Congresswoman Tlaib were denied entry. Congresswoman Tlaib was later allowed to come in, but she decided not to. Should there be any change in U.S. aid to Israel?
No. And you should see the horrible things that Tlaib has said about Israel. And AOC plus 3, that's what I call it. AOC, just take AOC plus 3. And you should see the things that the four of them have said about Israel over the last couple of years. I mean, Omar is a disaster for Jewish people. I can't imagine if she has any Jewish people in her district that they could possibly vote for. But what Omar has said, what Tlaib has said, and then yesterday I noticed for the first time, Tlaib with the tears. All of a sudden, she starts with tears. And I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a second, because I've seen her in a very vicious mood at campaign rallies, my campaign rallies, before she was a congresswoman. I said, who is that? And I saw a woman that was violent and vicious and out of control. And all of a sudden I see this person who's crying because she can't see her grandmother. She could see her grandmother. They gave her permission to see her grandmother, but she grandstanded and she didn't want to do it. So that's a decision of Israel. That's not a lot of people are saying that was my decision. That's a decision of Israel. They can let them in if they want, but I don't think they want to. When you read the things that they've said about Israel, how bad, and if you look at their itinerary before they found out, you take a look at their itinerary, that was all going to be a propaganda tour against Israel. So I don't blame Israel for doing what they did. I don't blame them for doing what they did. I think it would have been very bad to let them in, including the four. I'm talking about all four, but these two that wanted to get in, Omar and Tlaib. And I think it would be a very bad thing for Israel, but Israel has to do what they want to do. But I would not cut off aid to Israel. And I can't even believe that we're having this conversation. 5 years ago, the concept of even talking about this, even 3 years ago, of cutting off aid to Israel because of two people that hate Israel and hate Jewish people, I can't believe we're even having this conversation. Where has the Democratic Party gone? Where have they gone where they're defending these two people over the state of Israel? And I think any Jewish people that vote for a Democrat, I think it shows either a total lack of knowledge or great disloyalty. All right? Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, Brad. We're leaving now. Thank you guys for leaving now. Thank you guys.
Well, 29 minutes there of questions and answers. Among the topics, Vladimir Putin outsmarted President Obama and he kicked them out of the G8. Of course, Vladimir Putin invaded Crimea and annexed it, and that was the punishment. On background checks, for a while it was, we need strong background checks. We got to do something on strong background checks. There's bipartisan support for background checks. On universal background checks, the American people are 90% in favor. Republicans, self-identified Republicans, 89% in favor, but not the NRA. So in background checks, he says, and I quote, there are missing areas and areas that don't complete the full circle. On Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman representing 780,000 people in her district, she is violent, vicious, and out of control. She hates Israel and the Jewish people. The war in Afghanistan, he says, is ridiculous. Afghanistan is the Harvard University of terrorism, and nobody in this world can be trusted. The President of the United States from the White House today. John Roberts was there, head of the pool, 29 minutes. And in summation on your part, John?
The president clearly had a lot on his mind today, Shep, that he wanted to get off. He saw Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar give that press conference yesterday. The president, as he said there, thinks that it's ridiculous to consider changing the aid that the United States gives to Israel, which is to the tune of some $3.8 billion a year. And that was something that was done during the Obama administration. So he's in stark disagreement there. Of course, there's a lot of personal barbs that fly back and forth between all sides in that. So not surprising that the president would take them on personally in the way that he did. I asked him the question specifically about Afghanistan and the Taliban, because there are a number of people in the administration who believe that if the United States cuts a deal with the Taliban and then exits Afghanistan, U.S. forces exit Afghanistan, that within a very short period of time, the Taliban will be back in control in Afghanistan, and we will go back to a pre-9/11 posture. The president was clear in saying that the Taliban cannot be trusted. So you wonder exactly how the negotiations are going to go. But the president did say that he plans on leaving some sort of force there in Afghanistan to try to keep the Taliban in check. Don't know if that's a good long-term solution or not. On the economy, the president said that he is looking at a number of tax cuts, including perhaps indexing of capital gains, maybe a cut in capital gains and a temporary cut in the payroll tax. That was done twice before in the Obama administration as part of the economic stimulus package. But the president then also turning toward China and saying, look, whether or not there is some short-term pain here as a result of his negotiations with China is irrelevant. He says what we cannot afford to do is allow the status quo to continue long-term, because that will be to the severe detriment economically of the United States. So I think that those are pretty much the highlights there, Shep. He said that there won't be a tax cut anytime soon, but that he's looking at all of it and continues to be at odds with the members of the squad.
I would disagree with you only in that I thought your question and his answer was noteworthy at minimum when you said that the Chinese could wipe out our bases in the area of the South China Sea in a matter of hours. And you asked him, Mr. President, is that something that keeps you up at night? And he said, nothing keeps me up at night.
Well, he doesn't sleep a whole lot, so maybe he's staying up most of the night. But I was talking about this study out of Australia that Jennifer Griffin has been reporting on from over at the Pentagon. That says that the strength of the Chinese military in the Indo-Pacific region, and specifically the South China Sea area, with a lot of missiles that were banned under the INF Treaty that the United States was a signatory to, which is one of the reasons many military experts say the United States had to get out of it. But this study out of Australia said that within a number of hours, China could do so much damage to U.S. military assets in the Indochina region that we would spend the first part of a war licking our wounds as opposed to mounting any sort of counteroffensive. But the president dismissed that, saying we've got the strongest military in the world, that we're continuing the buildup. But he did say that he doesn't think China would do that because they would pay a price that they don't want to pay. So there were some very strong words in there as they pressed the president on whether or not that is a looming problem. But there are a lot of military experts, Shep, who do believe that that is one of the critical issues and threats that the United States will face in the years to come.
You've been a correspondent for decades. I wonder if you've ever heard a sitting president call a sitting member of Congress violent, vicious, and out of control.
I have not, Shep, but I believe that back in the 1800s, you could probably find a number of cases of that happening. Don't forget, and I can't remember the people who were involved, but there was one member of Congress who took a cane to another member of Congress in the chamber. So maybe this is a return to the way things used to be. I don't know, but it certainly is different than it has been for the past few decades.
Thank you, John. John Roberts on the North Lawn. The news is ahead.